The night sky over Eastern Europe was alive with fire. Hundreds of drones and missiles streaked through the darkness, their glowing trails colliding with a storm of Russian anti-aircraft fire. Explosions rippled across the horizon as radar operators in Moscow celebrated another failed Ukrainian assault. But what looked like a disaster for Ukraine was actually the beginning of one of the most brilliant deception operations of the war. On September 28, 2025, Ukraine launched an attack that would later be called the drone trap. At first glance, it seemed like chaos, wave after wave of drones falling from the sky, intercepted before they could reach their targets. Yet behind that chaos was precision. Every wave, every decoy, every sacrifice was designed to overwhelm, distract, and exhaust Russia's defenses. And in that confusion, when Russian commanders believed they had already won, the real strike broke through, slamming into a critical power plant. To an outsider, hitting an energy hub might sound less dramatic than destroying a tank depot or airfield. But Ukraine understood something deeper. In modern war, electricity is power. Cut it off, and trains stop moving. Communications collapse. Factories stall. Cities go dark. For years, Russia boasted about its impenetrable air defenses. This night exposed their weakness. Ammunition stockpiles dwindled. Radar systems were blinded. And in the end, the lights went out. Not in Kyiv, but inside Russia itself. This wasn't just another drone strike. It was a lesson in psychological warfare, where the real weapon wasn't explosives, but misdirection. A masterstroke that forced the world to ask, did Ukraine just rewrite the rulebook of modern war? Because if deception can outsmart one of the most advanced militaries on Earth, then every army, from NATO to China back, is now rethinking how battles will be fought in the years to come. Stay tuned, because in this video we'll break down how the operation worked, why deception mattered more than firepower, and what this stunning attack means for the future of war. To understand why this strike mattered so much, we need to step back. For months, Ukraine had been refining its drone warfare strategy. Unlike Russia's massive air force, Ukraine couldn't rely on fleets of jets or endless stockpiles of missiles. Instead, it turned to something smaller, cheaper, and easier to produce: drones. By 2024, drones had become the equalizer. They weren't just eyes in the sky, they were weapons, saboteurs, and psychological tools. Some carried explosives, others carried cameras, and many were built simply to confuse radar. Ukraine realized that if they couldn't outgun Russia, they could outthink them. Russia, for its part, had built one of the world's most layered and complex air defense networks. From S-300s to Panzer systems, their anti-aircraft umbrella was supposed to make their skies untouchable. But like any shield, it had a weakness. It could be overloaded. That's where the deception came in. Ukraine began studying Russia's radar patterns, its reaction times, and how many missiles they were willing to waste on drones. They knew Russia would always fire at what they believed was a threat, and every missile fired at a decoy was one less missile for the real attack. So in late September 2025, Ukraine put this strategy to the ultimate test. They launched wave after wave of cheap drones, deliberately designed to appear threatening. Russian defenses lit up the sky, burning through their stockpiles. Operators believed they were winning, unaware that Ukraine was carefully setting the stage for a much bigger strike. And behind this operation wasn't just military planning. It was a statement. Ukraine wanted to show the world that brains could beat brute force, that deception could pierce even the strongest armor. This wasn't just about one power plant. It was about reshaping the battlefield itself. The brilliance of Ukraine's September strike wasn't just in the number of drones. It was in the timing and coordination. Each drone wave was carefully mapped. The first wave was noisy, obvious, and designed to trigger panic. Russian radar screens lit up instantly, operators scrambling to lock on targets. Minutes later came the second wave, slightly different in altitude and direction, giving the illusion of a larger assault. But here's the key. Most of these drones carried little or no explosives. They weren't meant to destroy, they were meant to distract. Every time Russian forces launched an interceptor missile, they were draining their own defenses. Think of it like a boxer throwing light jabs before delivering the knockout punch. The jabs don't win the fight, but they tire the opponent, making them vulnerable when the real hit comes. After several exhausting rounds of drone swarms, the real strike package was unleashed. Larger, more advanced drones slipped through the chaos, targeting a critical power plant inside Russia. The explosion was devastating, not just physically but symbolically. It proved that even the most defended targets were vulnerable. Military analysts worldwide took notice. They pointed out that Ukraine had done something extraordinary. It had turned weakness into strength. Without fleets of jets or precision-guided missiles, Ukraine had built a weapon of strategy, deception itself. This wasn't the first time drones had been used in war, but never before had they been used so deliberately to manipulate psychology, overwhelm defenses, and pave the way for a decisive strike. It was a message not just to Russia, but to the world. In modern warfare, brains can defeat budgets. The aftermath of Ukraine's strike was far more destructive than the blast itself. When the Belgorod power plant went dark, it wasn't just a blackout. It was the collapse of an entire system. Within minutes, trains carrying ammunition and fuel froze on tracks. Communications between Russian command centers went silent. Soldiers at the front, already under pressure, were suddenly cut off from orders, reinforcements, and supplies. Imagine this: an army of thousands, but its nervous system has been severed. No eyes, no ears, no voice. That was the Russian reality on September 28th, and the chaos spread quickly. Civilians panicked as elevators stopped mid-floor, gas stations overflowed with desperate crowds, and supermarkets turned into battlegrounds for food and generator fuel. The blackout wasn't just a military strike, it was a psychological weapon that brought an entire city to its knees. For the Russian military, the humiliation was even worse. On paper, their air defense systems had intercepted hundreds of drones. The Ministry of Defense proudly announced victory, but within hours, videos leaked online showing the truth: massive fires, dark cities, and panicked civilians. Even NASA's satellites confirmed the explosions. The propaganda collapsed in real time. Strategically, the consequences were brutal. Russia was forced to rethink its doctrine. For decades, the belief was simple: keep the war outside Russian borders. But Ukraine shattered that illusion. Suddenly, Moscow realized that nowhere was truly safe, not even in its own backyard. And here's the ripple effect. To protect cities like Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk, Russia had no choice but to pull advanced air defense systems away from the front lines. That meant fewer defenses for occupied territories in Ukraine. It was a deadly trade: shield your homeland, or risk losing ground at the front. Ukraine's genius was clear. With a handful of drones and rockets, they forced Russia into a strategic dilemma that no amount of propaganda could fix. This wasn't just another military strike. It was a textbook demonstration of modern warfare's evolution. Ukraine's operation against Belgrade proved that wars are no longer decided only by tanks and trenches or jets in the sky. The battlefield has expanded into infrastructure, psychology, and technology. The genius of the strike was not simply in destroying a power plant. It was in showing how fragile even the strongest armies can be when their support systems collapse. A few rockets and drones, cheaper than a single modern fighter jet, achieved what months of traditional fighting could not, crippling Russia's ability to command, supply, and maintain its army. Think about it. For the cost of a handful of missiles, Ukraine forced Russia to waste millions of dollars in interceptor missiles, S-400 launches, and emergency logistics. This was asymmetric warfare at its finest, where creativity beats brute force. But the bigger picture goes beyond the battlefield. The attack on Belgrade was also a message to the world. Ukraine proved that even a nation outgunned and outspent can strike at the very heart of its opponent, using intelligence, timing, and innovation. It was a statement: we can reach you anywhere. For Russia, the consequences were long-term. Military analysts worldwide noted how the strike forced Moscow to reposition its defenses. Every S-400 battery pulled back to protect infrastructure left the front lines more vulnerable. Every blackout reminded Russian citizens that the war was no longer distant. It was at their doorstep. That's a powerful psychological blow, one that no propaganda can easily erase. The Belgrade operation will be remembered not just as an attack, but as a strategic turning point. It highlighted the shift from mass armies to precision strikes, from brute strength to intelligent disruption. In modern war, it's not always the side with the most firepower that wins. It's the side that can outthink, outmaneuver, and outsmart its opponent. And on that September night, Ukraine showed the world what that looks like.